tell me how to pronounce your name.
Ma'am, am I audible?
Absolutely.
My name is Debojyoti. That's fine.
Dan.
Ah.
Debojyoti Dan. Okay, wonderful. I wasn't very far away, so it makes me feel like I've nearly made the estimate. Thank you, and please begin with your paper.
Okay, the title of my paper is Pasolini's Salò as an adaptation of Sadean Text. So Sade, as you know, Marquis de Sade is a French guy, and he wrote the book Salò et 85 jours de Sodoma. Has been translated by Pierre Pasolini as Salò ou les 42 giornate de Sodoma. So, how, when we are reading Sade and when we are watching the film, the dimensions get different. So, the nuanced application of censorship has condemned Pierre Pasolini Italian film as well as the French writing in the space of disgust and transgression of psychological hygiene of the mass. Pasolini's telos is neither an epistemic closure of pornographic rituals nor a sexual template of amoral hedonism. Pasolini dexterously adapts Sade's state of exception into a space of blunt trauma, where shit-eating and pleasure together are brought into the dimensional plane that strips the three-dimensional category as the camera moves from the shit to the pleasure, from pleasure to the shit and the blood within. The act of storytelling inside the film plays an important part as the female narrator of lurid sexual tales is telling the story without epistemic closure, and through a story the trauma is reinforced in the grand narrative of Pasolini, and thus taking out the music of Gothic out from the text. Like when Sade has tried to portray the sexuality and the darkness, it has its own Gothic music about it, satanism with it. But when Pasolini is putting it in the movie, we see the satanism is undermined with unpleasant jokes, and Gothic is undermined with farce, and apathy and alienation is setting in. The tension, both hormonal and psychological, is interrupted with ambivalent lampooning, and what was carnival of lust for Sade is a carnival of rust for Pasolini. Sade turns the unnatural, dark, hidden desire into natural. But Pasolini turned them into artificial. The cultural value of both their art is delineated with exorcist passion. While Sade was exorcising ecclesiastical hypocrisy of enlightenment of 15th century, 16th century France, Pasolini was doing the same with consumerism that is there in the time that we belong to in America. Pasolini tries to advocate the flat ontology of object orientism, and thereby shit, commode, mirror, floor, carton becomes the narrative, as much as the human body becomes the garbage of consumerist agenda. The very originality of this film is its ability to go beyond the biopolitics of Foucault and opens up a performative space of necropolitics and thanocentrism through pornology and sexography. The mysticism of supremacy of human body is subverted, and the consumerist agenda of American vantage is dismantled through the critical survey of trauma of fascism and Nazism. The human body is treated here neither as a docile one nor as a rebellious one, rather as an object of travesty, lampooning and farce. Trauma of suffering is resolutely made to become the adhesive keeping the grand narrative whole. The raison d'etre of this film is not pleasure pain, but a farce. And the teleology of the film is not sex, but blood. Sex comes at the cost of pleasure pain. Here it comes at a comic venture to find this game is a ridiculous and funny. And Doucet's jokes demonstrate a travesty of suffering. Pasolini's work is to make his humor anticlimactic, which creates the element of farce, and the entire energy of audience is drawn not to the binaries of pleasure and pain, but more towards a feeling of subversion, of consumption. In the same way, pleasure-pain dynamics of BDSM, as we know, bondage, discipline, dominance, and submission, of sadomasochism is dismissed at the very outset of the film, when we are threatened by the brutal assaults involving no foreplay and no undressing. The ontological threat aimed at the humiliation of the naked, defenseless, and otherwise inert body turns epistemic, which look almost as though they were willing for the gas chamber. The viewers wanting to masturbate by the titillation of the role play, the film generates a nausea by using alienation through pun, blatant jokes, and other forms of lampooning. The mise-en-scène is such that the victims, for the most part, are hard to recognize from one scene to the other, and the very montage creates a retinal distance with any sentiment or erotic identification by the viewers with the prisoners, thereby breaking the rhyme of sexual ecstasy or any form of pleasure, which was the intention of Sadean Text, to give the dark pleasure of BDSM. Thereby, the film at cellular level becomes disturbing with its subversion of testosterone and adrenaline, and the remarkability of the montage and the frames creates a detached visuality with the victims. For instance, when Doucet is using the binocular in the reverse, instead of drawing the sexual montage closer or closer to us, we are being pushed away, as if the camera is pushing us away from the scene. Pasolini's camera provides the apparatus.
Jyoti, please conclude.
Yeah.
Please
just give me a little more time, please. Just a little more. Pasolini's camera provides the apparatus for creating a kind of non-rapport with the bodies of the condemned, as it took long and medium shots that refuses intimacy with the victims. The close-ups and the zoom in is rejected to create a distance between the gaze of the object. Here the praxis of sadism and masochism is more epistemic than ontological, and they do not involve pleasure, even in passive form, that of the voyeurism, which is stigmatized by the film's final sequence, as it shows the libertine looking at their victims being tortured through the binoculars held in reverse to reduce the size of the image. So to conclude, I would like to quote a few of the dialogues to show how Doucet is using cinema as a lampoon. When Doucet says, "Carlo, put your finger like this. Are you able to say I cannot eat rice, keeping your fingers like this?" Bruno enlarging his mouth with his fingers. "I cannot eat the rice." Doucet says, "So then eat shit." And again, another joke. When Doucet says, "Do you know what a Bolshevik makes when he takes plunge into the Red Sea?" Ambato says, "No, I do not know." Doucet says, "You do not know what a Bolshevik will make when he makes plunge into the Red Sea?" Ambato says, "No, please tell me." Doucet said, "He will make a splash." The desultory punchline is like the most jarring, since the political premise of the joke includes a reference to Bolshevism, which seem to promise a more substantive effort. And not only that, if you see the character of Doucet, he will remind you the face of Doucet reminds us very much, and his attitude as well reminds us of American president and George W. Bush, and how this entire cosmopolitanism and the entire idea of consumerism is used, and when we see that shit and the food and how they are recycled product, the neocapitalist culture of recycling the shit to make it food, it becomes the very enigmatic, and therefore I would like to say that Sadean's text, which has followed the chronological time of sexual anecdotes and torture scenes and sexual passion scenes, are being heavily cut down into make it in a more funny farcical sense. So even though there is a blatant penetration and vaginal mutilation in the book, we see the Pasolini had the scope, but Pasolini did not indulge in it. Pasolini make a fun of it. He would make fun that eat shit, So that's how Pasolini transcended Sade's text into entering into a region where you cannot masturbate while seeing a play. Being a boy and being a woman, you cannot but just watch and laugh, even though the scenes are gruesome. Even in the play, the montage will make you laugh, even though you see the disembowelment of a pregnant woman, because they are infused with kinds of jokes that are that you make hell never time.
Thank you for this very very